Welcome back to our lectures on Frank Lloyd Wright. We're in modern architecture and Frank Lloyd Wright, and we are in our second lecture, a brief biographical overview of Wright. So let's find out a little bit about Frank Lloyd Wright, the person, before we go back to his architecture. Wright was born in a little farming town in Wisconsin. Here's a postcard from actually the year Wright was born, so we can see the world that he was born into. His father was an itinerant teacher and preacher, never did well, and eventually Wright's mother threw him out when Wright was 14. His mother was a very strong person. She was a school teacher, and very famous story, she put prints of English cathedrals on her bedroom wall while she was pregnant with him to get him started on being an architect really, really early. So that was the plan from the beginning. His mother bought him Freuble blocks. It's sort of like Lego blocks, and he was thinking spatially from childhood, and we see the influence of these on his later work. He centered his career around Chicago. It's where he had his first job. And we see how Chicago is at the center of the country. Chicagoans prided themselves as being away from the East Coast, which they felt was too influenced by Europe. But look at how it's the center of the rivers and then the center of railroads in the United States. And Chicago experienced very rapid growth. Today it's the third largest city in the United States. Now, right now we're experiencing this fantastic growth and development of Dubai, which went in just a few years from this. This is the same road here and here. And look, 1990 to 2007, this explosive growth of this city. Well, we all know about that. That's what it was like in Chicago when Wright was there. It was undergoing this explosive growth. And then in 1871, there was a great fire, and it destroyed the entire downtown. So it created an opportunity for the architects, for these new buildings that we're going to do. The most important Chicago school architect was Louis Sullivan, and Wright went to work for Sullivan, who he called his mentor or Liebermeister, dear master, and Wright became a hot young architect in Chicago and then was fired by Sullivan for what's called the bootleg buildings, for doing work on his own at home over the weekends. You're not supposed to do that. So Sullivan wrote a book about all this, and he writes, then presto, as it were, came a magic change. The city had become the center of a great radiating system of railroads. The lake traffic changed from sail to steam. The population had grown to 500,000 and then to 1 million, from starting at just a pitiful 4,000. And then he describes that the building shifted from iron to steel, and we had hydraulic elevators, electric lighting, all these things happening explosively, making possible these new buildings. The most famous building by Sullivan is the Wainwright building, happens to be in St. Louis, but it's considered a Chicago school building, and Frank Lloyd Wright was the job captain on this project. So, but this building is famous for having a base, shaft, and then capital. But it's just the part that you see. As soon as you get around the corner, all that goes away. And Wright very much objected that. He felt that the facade should come from the inside out, and we see that in his own skyscraper. But there was a strong unity between the two in their approach to organic architecture. We'll have a lecture about that at the end of the course. But Sullivan wrote, the germ is the real thing, the seat of identity. Within its delicate mechanism lies the will to power, the function which is to seek and eventually to find its full expression in form. And Wright writes, what is honor? Not the rules of a code, but the nature of honor. Well, we'll spend more time with that later with our lectures. He married Kitty Tobin, and then in 1909, he ran off with another woman, leaving her with 6 kids. He built this house for them, and it kept expanding as his family expanded. The woman he ran off with was Mama Cheney, for whom he had done a house. They went to Europe. They came back to the United States, where they stayed at a compound that Wright built at Taliesin, where she and 2 of her children were murdered. Very tragic story. This is Taliesin, the compound that Wright built for them. He was briefly married to Maud, and then Olga, or known as Olgavana for her putting together her first and last name, a Russian dancer, writer, said, okay, I'm going to marry you and take care of you, and they were married until he died. His career was launched with his Prairie Style, as we saw before, and then became to great notoriety with Falling Water. Had a major show in 1940 at the Museum of Modern Art, and then 1959 dies. He saw the completion of the Guggenheim Museum, but not its opening. Some of the changes that Wright experienced over the course of his life, from this little town to a modern metropolis. Now here's a fun slide. Here's Wright's first Prairie-style house. Here's a car. Looks like it fits there, doesn't it? There's this Mercedes in the driveway. This is what cars actually looked like when that house was built. So see how modern it is. So this was a car when Wright was built, a car when Wright died. This was siege guns in the Civil War when Wright was born. That's a hydrogen bomb, weaponry when he died, a spotter balloon during the Civil War, satellites when Wright died. When Wright was born, they just completed the Transcontinental Railroad. Wright traveled on 707 jets at the end of his life. They just completed, before he was born, the transatlantic telegraph cable. When he died, they had cable satellites and Princess telephones. They had color TVs when he died, and computers, and they had just developed the transistor and the integrated circuit. So here's a question for you to think about. What changes have happened in your city during your lifetime compared to what Wright experienced in Chicago? And what changes technologically do you expect in your life over the next 30 years?